My name is Kyle Evans, and I'll be talking to you about the good, the bad, and the ugly. How to take OKRs from theory to practice while avoiding common pitfalls. A little about me. I've been a product practitioner for around 15 years now. I've worked in a variety of industries, from finance to education to healthcare. I'm currently at a company called Team. We're focused on intelligent workplace management solutions, which is an exciting space right now because of all of the unknowns. I'm also a writer. I write frequently on a number of different platforms. I also have a bi-weekly newsletter called Product Thinking, which you can find more about on my website, kylelarryevans.com. I also have a few podcasts. The main one that you'd be interested in is called Product by Design, which you can find anywhere that you get podcasts. Outside of product, I do many things as well, as I'm sure lots of you do. I'll highlight one though. I'm a woodworker. So shout out to anybody who does woodworking. So let me know if you want to talk woodworking or anything like that. I'm happy to dive into that. And you can see more of some of the things that I do at evanswoodshop.com. But let's dive into what we're going to talk about today as an overview. We're going to be talking first about OKRs, what they are and why we like them. Then we'll jump into the good, what we can expect from OKRs and how to leverage them for success. Then we'll talk about the bad, some difficulties, how to anticipate them, and how we can overcome them. And finally, the ugly, the big obstacles to prepare for so we don't lose sight of our goals. I've been part of implementing OKRs at 4 companies now with a variety of success and failure. So I'm excited to share some of my stories. My comments are geared toward companies who are trying to implement OKRs, who may not be fully bought into the idea to some extent yet. So hopefully everybody will be able to get some amount of value from this discussion, whether you're fully bought in or headed in that direction. But first, let's talk about OKRs. I want to level set with everyone. Some of you are probably familiar with OKRs. Maybe you've used them, maybe you've tried them and been successful, or maybe you've been unsuccessful, or want to try them and begin now. But let's talk about what they are. The O stands for objective, and the KR stands for key results. The objective is what we do, the goal that we have or what we want to accomplish. And the key results are how we achieve that goal or how we measure success if we've been able to do it. OKRs were started at Intel years ago by Andy Grove and popularized by John Doerr in a book and through many companies that he's worked with, the book being Measure What Matters. So let's take a look at an example of an OKR from said book and from the time of Intel. So you can see that we have the objective, demonstrate the 80/80's superior performance, and then we have the key results, how we're going to accomplish that goal and measure success. So deliver benchmarks, deliver a demo, develop training, and call customers. But of course, we don't have to rely solely on Intel or John Doerr to provide us with OKRs. We can come up with our own as well. So I have one that I've created here. So I want to deliver a stellar, impactful OKR presentation. And how am I going to do that? Well, I want to help or inspire at least one person. I also want to learn 2 things about OKRs from you, and then hopefully come back and talk to you again. So I have the thing that I want to do, which is deliver the presentation, and then how I want to measure the success of that. Some of that relies on me, and then some of that is feedback from you as well. So hopefully you will reach out through the various channels, whether that's on Twitter, LinkedIn, or through the PLA Slack, and let me know how your journey is going and what you've learned or want to learn about some of our discussion or through the Q&A at the end of this session. So I want you to now imagine some scenarios with me. Maybe you've been in a scenario like this or something similar. The first one is that you are very feature focused. Everything you do revolves around creating the next feature, building one thing, building another, and then maybe connecting them in some way, or maybe not connecting them at all, but really just cranking out many, many features. Another scenario, maybe you're misaligned. Your team is doing one thing, other teams are doing another, and your organization is doing yet another. Or maybe it's that product is doing one thing and engineering is doing another. Another scenario, maybe you're just completely adrift. You don't have any clear strategy or vision, and you're just floating out in space. Or maybe you're being held hostage by changing priorities or predetermined priorities. Now, if we were together, I'd ask for a show of hands for anybody who has experienced some of these. I hope it's not just me, but I expect it's many of us, which is partly why we're here right now, to figure out how OKRs can be the solution to some of these scenarios, as well as many others, and how we can take some of the things that we're learning, the good, the bad, and even some of the ugly, and apply them to our work in order to come out of some of these situations that we may be in. Because in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice, there is. This comes from, or is at least attributed to, the baseball philosopher Yogi Berra, though it probably came before that. The wisdom, though, is the same, that in theory, it's very easy to get started, but in practice, it's very, very difficult to put some of these in practice. We'd all like to be able to simply pick up a book or an article, a presentation, read it, and then get to work implementing OKRs. If we're that simple, most of us would probably do it. It's rarely that simple or easy. So let's talk about what to do. How can we move from theory to practice? How can we find success? How can we avoid or at least anticipate some of the pitfalls? And how can we work around some of those difficulties? So let's start with the good. How can we leverage success of OKRs for ourselves, for our teams, and for our companies to build better products and better experiences? The two biggest benefits of OKRs for me, and there are many, but I think the two biggest are autonomy and focus. So first off, autonomy. Autonomy gives us the ability to experiment and find the right path forward. Once we have a clear strategic goal in mind, there can be many different ways to achieve that. And through OKRs, through this framework, we have the autonomy to figure out what is the right path forward, or what's the best way forward. And then how can we, once we've found that, focus in on it and achieve our goal through focusing on that right path in order to solve hard, meaningful problems. That's why we want to use OKRs. It's probably why you're here, to solve hard, meaningful problems, to have the autonomy and focus to do that. So how can we do that? How can we begin to incorporate them into our work to leverage some of those benefits? Well, first off, focus on your sphere of influence. Now, whether your company is on board with adopting them or not, and I've been in both situations where we've gone into it and the company is completely on board, or they're not on board and we have to show some success in order to move in that direction. That's fine. Either way, we can focus on our sphere of influence. And it starts with you. You can work on your own goals and move outward from there. You likely have a team that you're working with as well, and you can begin to help them understand OKRs and adopt them as well. And possibly within your sphere of influence is a broader team or organization or department that you can begin to work with as well. Again, it's easier if the whole company begins to adopt OKRs at the same time and works on them top down and bottom up. But even then, you have to start where you are. Outside of teams, we can also begin to incorporate the OKR mindset into our actual goals and discussions. Beginning with our own goals and then moving to our features as well. So as we're beginning to create features, incorporating those features into our broader OKRs. And then shifting the discussion around our roadmaps from simply a list of features into an actual meaningful discussion of why are we doing things, what are we trying to achieve, and how are those features, how is our roadmap driving towards that? Many of these things are likely within your sphere of influence, at least to some degree. So start to move the conversation in that direction. But we'll be the only ones. I can't change our planning because our company does it this way. We were in a very similar situation where, and I have been in a similar situation many times, where our planning is very feature driven. We needed dates and features, and that was the focus. And so I have started along these same lines, moving from simply feature and date focused to something more like this, shifting the idea from here's our features and our dates to here's our goals and objectives and the features that are driving those things. And right now, that's exactly what we are doing and what we're working on. And this is an example of a current roadmap that I have that shows what are our goals, our OKRs, the objectives, the key results, and then what are the features within that are going to drive those. Now, these aren't our actual OKRs or the actual features. I've gone through and changed them so that I could show this to you. But this is the actual framework that is driving the discussions that we're having so that we can shift the focus from just the features to a higher level discussion around objectives, key results, and then how all of those play into it within our roadmap. OKRs and good roadmaps can work hand in hand. OKRs can set the direction and roadmaps can lay the course, and together they can guide our products and teams. Many of us, I'm sure, have been victims of bad roadmaps and bad roadmap practices, but OKRs can help shift that focus and put the features back where they should be and the focus of our roadmaps back to a strategic view. Next up, we can enlist the help of other product people. This is somewhat self-explanatory, but if we're trying to get everybody on board, we need the help of others. And so as we start with ourselves and move to our teams and our organizations, we can enlist the help of other product people because we as product people get it. We want to focus on outcomes, and other product people speak our language. So get them on board through trainings, within our meetings, through our discussions. Show your results as well. It's one thing to talk about all of this, to talk about it with your team, to talk about it with other product people, but nothing will be more impactful and get people on board faster than actually showing the results that you can get through OKRs. So I have a friend who had this experience. So he joined an organization as a manager, and he felt the misalignment right away. His product managers were struggling to focus, and there wasn't a clear direction, but there were a ton of features. So he took time to measure what they were actually doing. And then he got buy-in to experiment with OKRs. And that's how he sold it, was as an experiment. And so they tried it. So he took the time to measure it. and then experimented with it. And that's how they branded it, as an experiment. And because of that, they were able to push back against some of the thrashing that normally would have taken place. And as an experiment, because of that, they were able to significantly focus and then show meaningful results at the very end and measure what they had done. And in fact, they were able to deliver meaningful results for the first time, and everybody was delighted. Rather than continue to get small movement across many areas, sales and marketing and stakeholders got big movement in a few key areas. And they were able to tie that directly to a few key metrics that they were targeting. It quieted the doubters and helped them move forward in a significant way. He even mentioned after the fact that other departments started to ask how they could adopt the OKR thingies that he was doing. So by measuring, experimenting, and then showing results, he was able to help demonstrate how OKRs at his organization could significantly change what they were doing. And that was better than all of the conversations that they were having and moved the needle significantly. Results will speak louder than all of our meetings. So let others see the benefits, even if small, and then build on that. So we've talked about how to leverage the good of OKRs and build on that success. Now we need to talk about the bad. These are the difficulties that you'll encounter, the pitfalls along the way, because this is hard. No matter what anybody says, it's difficult. Whether you have full buy-in from the organization or whether you're trying to help move your organization in this direction. So what are some of those pitfalls? First off, rushing the process. Creating good objectives and key results is difficult. It takes time and energy, and you can't do it quickly. But often we try and do that. We try and rush the process. Steve Jobs shared a story in an interview about getting polished stones. As a kid, he said that he had a neighbor who had a stone polishing machine. And so he went there one day and they took a handful of just normal stones and put them in this drum along with some grit and some liquid, and then turned it on. And after a day of it beating around, Steve came back and they pulled out these stones that had been just normal stones from the backyard, and they had turned into these beautiful polished rocks. And that had taken time. It had taken some friction. And that is just like the process of our OKRs. It takes time. It takes some friction. It takes some practice. We can't necessarily rush that process, even though we really want to. So we need to take some time to polish our OKRs and not rush that process, though that is a common thing that we will often want to do. We all want to move fast, but it takes time to get it right, and you can't create meaningful change or good goals, good OKRs, in 30 minutes or even an hour. It takes time. The next pitfall, missing metrics or links. Unfortunately, even after we take the time to create good objectives and good key results to go with them, often we are missing the data to support that. We may have the key results that we want, but we may not have any way to actually measure that. We may have, one piece of data here or another there, or we may have nothing at all. We may want to measure certain things and not have it at all, or we may in fact have some of it within our team, but no way of linking that with the broader organization. But don't despair. This is actually a good thing because you're bringing out an issue that you want to expose. Because until you shine a spotlight on the fact that there is a disconnect between what you're doing and how you're measuring it, you can't actually fix it. So shine the spotlight and get to work fixing it. It may not be pretty at first. You may have to pull manual data. You may have to update SQL queries for a while. I know I've done that. But once you've homed in on the right things, you can start to make it happen. The next pitfall is you will want to do everything. It's only natural. One thing that I've seen recently is taking all of the things that you have been doing and simply putting them into OKRs. And some of these have good bones, but you are missing the point if you simply take everything that you want to do and put it in an OKR format. You're not focusing. Another one, I remember coming into a meeting where we had one of the managers had their 3 OKRs, and each of them had between like 7 and 10 key results associated with it. Again, you can't focus on OKRs that have 7 to 10 key results associated with them. You can't do everything. Maybe you've really focused in on what your OKR is going to be, which is great. In this case, win the World Cup, go Team USA, and you've got your key results. Awesome. But then everything else starts to creep in again, and you start to lose focus. Again, all of these things are symptoms of the same problem. It's difficult to focus the way that we want to because we want to still do everything. But if we want to solve those hard, meaningful problems, we have to focus on the right things and do those really, really well. And this is one of the biggest common pitfalls of trying to do OKRs, really trying to do anything, is that we try and do everything and we fail to focus on the right things. Finally, OKRs are a new muscle. This is one of the biggest pitfalls is we struggle with building this new muscle. OKRs are like the friend who always skipped leg day. We may be good at some things, but we haven't developed this muscle yet. So how will this manifest? First off, we feel like we need to go full speed ahead. We need to move at 120 miles per hour or 200 kilometers per hour right away. That's how I usually feel when I'm pumped up and ready to go. I want to get moving as fast as possible. I want to dive in. But that isn't always possible. And so sometimes we need to take it one step at a time and just know that we're not going to be able to do everything all at once. This is the crock pot or the slow cooker that we grew up with. Very, very old school. The great thing about slow cookers is you can set them and forget them. Put the food in, come back in 8 hours, and it will be ready. You cannot do that with OKRs. You cannot set it and forget it, which is one of the common mistakes. You cannot do your OKRs at the beginning of the quarter and come back to them at the end and expect that you will be successful. So don't do that. Find ways that you can revisit them each week, every other week, until you build that muscle. Put them in your meetings frequently and revisit them. Otherwise, you will forget about them and fall into the old patterns that you were in before. Next up, you may not feel like you've gotten the full autonomy. OKRs are meant to help teams have the autonomy, and you may not feel like you're there yet. That hasn't worked out like you hoped for, that you're still shackled to some of the old ways. That's common. It's a common pitfall of organizations trying to change. But remember, it's a process, not an event, which kind of plays into the last thing, is that we feel often that it has to be all or nothing, that if we haven't done everything, we've been successful at nothing. But remember, OKRs don't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to implement them 100% in the first quarter, and you don't have to be perfect at the start. It's a journey to get through. Which, of course, leads us now to the ugly. OKRs are not a cure-all. They are not a silver bullet for our organizations, for our teams, or for all the ills of the world, unfortunately. Because org change is impossible. I don't mean to be a downer here, but one does not simply change an organizational culture, at least not in the short term. I have tried to change organizational cultures. Maybe some of you have as well. Organizational change is possible, not in the short term, over a medium and long term, and with the right ingredients, which include time, influence, incentives, and leverage. We won't dive into that too much right now, but just understand that this is a difficulty that you will not be able to overcome easily, and that will be an obstacle that you need to understand as you begin an OKR journey, that they will not cure an organizational culture, and they will not change it as rapidly as you might hope. But everybody said they wanted change and agreed it was a great idea. Yes, they did, but remember, change is hard. Everybody wants change in the past, and everybody wants change, but not necessarily for themselves. But don't despair, and what to do about it. Don't expect to change your organization overnight. Don't expect to do it alone. And take the victories. There will be victories. It will happen with time, and you can move things in the right direction. That's for certain. So just remember that, and don't let it get you down too fast or too quickly. The next ugly thing is project thinking. One of my favorite posts that I've written was called Product Thinking versus Project Thinking. Project thinking is pretty pervasive and is really based on the what and the when, the outputs and the dates. It's a mentality of certainty because we all crave certainty. We want to know exactly what we're going to get and when we're going to get it. Product thinking is different. It's focused on the why, the outcomes, while embracing the uncertainty, the unknowns, and understanding that we can't know for certain what will work and what won't work. Product thinking embraces uncertainty, allows us to learn and adapt, and keeps us focused on the outcome that we're trying to achieve. We won't necessarily get rid of project thinking. Like I said, org change is hard, but OKRs help us down the right path. They help start to change our thinking from project thinking, which is very focused again on the outputs and the dates, to product thinking, which is focused on why we're doing things, embracing the uncertainty, the unknowns of the future, while allowing us to adapt along the way. So again, knowing that this is something that we will encounter, a difficulty, we can prepare for it and just understand that it isn't something that we can necessarily overcome in the short term, but we can in the long term. And finally, the final ugly fact is that you will fail. Things won't always go your way. You will get hit in the face. You will fall flat, despite your best efforts. Things won't go like you expect. But we shouldn't let failures stop us. Failure is the beginning. It's not the end of our process. In my newsletter, which you should all check out, and I'll give a link at the end, I wrote about Mars exploration. This is a page from one of our favorite books about space, and it talks about exploring Mars and how we have sent over 40 missions to Mars, and only 12 and now 13 have actually landed successfully on Mars. And I find that really interesting. We tend to forget about all of the unsuccessful ones because we've been so successful recently. Now we're sending cars to Mars, and we're lowering them to the surface with sky cranes, which is crazy awesome. And that's the beauty of what we're doing now. We have to remember that we're playing the long game. We can't let a few difficulties get in the way of us getting to Mars and beyond. OKRs aren't necessarily just about this quarter or the next. They're about making a meaningful impact for the long term, about moving the conversation for our teams and our organizations beyond just the features and the outputs and to the outcomes those features are driving. So it's a short-term and a long-term mission that we have. And we shouldn't let a few pitfalls or difficulties get in the way of us achieving those long-term goals. So with that, I wish each of us luck. If you'd like to connect with me, my website is kylelarryevans.com. I'm also on Twitter at kylelarryevans and on LinkedIn. You can find my podcast at productbydesign.co, also available on anywhere you get your podcasts. My newsletter is called Product Thinking, available at productthinking.cc. And if you're interested in any of my woodworking, you can check that out at evanswoodshop.com. So I look forward to hearing from you. I'd love your feedback on anything you'd like to hear on a podcast, in a newsletter, or in future conference talks, or just connecting to chat. So I look forward to your questions and your comments and talking again soon. Thank you so much.